Crack! With a flash of light, a spear imbued with destructive energy lightly touched the stone steel. The steel toppled as cracks began to crawl across it. With a thud, it crashed to the ground in pieces. Humph! The steel of Wu of Han opening Dian. It was fine as long as I didn't know about it. But now that I know, why should I let it remain? A general bursting with explosive power slowly rode his horse out of the rear, his eyes gleaming with a sharp light. In the future, the Tang will no longer be able to step past the Arai. The Southwest will become our world. The general's gaze was filled with pain and loathing as it swept over those shards of stone by the road. Only the generals of Mengshi Zhao could feel such hatred toward this steel commemorating Emperor Wu of Han's edict to open Dian. Haha, an excellent strike, General. The Han treated the people of Mengshi Zhao like slaves, so you should have smashed it. However, our Yusang is different. Yusang is Mengshi Zhao's ally, so we should naturally deal with the Tang together. Daluan Ruozhen waved his fan as he slowly walked out. A faint smile hung over his face and he exuded an air of grace and elegance. Humph, it better be. The general snorted before standing to the side. Great Minister, do not blame him. Generals are all rough people, as is their way of speaking. The king of Mengshi Zhao, Zheluofeng, walked out from the rear, bringing with him Crown Prince Fengjie, Great General Duan Guchuan, and a group of generals from Mengshi Zhao. Ha ha ha, it's fine, it's fine. I take no offense, no offense. Daluan Ruozhen heartily laughed as he waved his hand, but a strange gleam flashed through his eyes. We Tibetans are the same. The two smiled at each other and put the matter aside, their gazes turning as one toward the mountain. They were now 50 zhang from the base of the mountain, where a massive wall of steel now stood. These steel walls were made of extremely heavy and thick chunks of metal. Thousands of them, section by section, layer by layer, row by row, extended all the way to the summit. And thousands of great Tang infantry were hiding behind these walls, standing at the ready. Like hungry wolves, they stared down at the Mengshi Yusang army below. Although the Battle of Arai had inflicted massive casualties on the Annan Protectorate army, and less than 70,000 remained, each one of these survivors was an elite who had only gotten stronger from their experiences, not weaker. In terms of fighting power, the Tang soldiers actually ranked above the soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army. In terms of soldier quality, not even the Tibetans could compare. This isn't good. Daluan Ruozhen's eyebrows rose. Even though he wasn't skilled in the art of war, he could tell at a glance that the Tang had succeeded in establishing a series of incredibly troublesome fortifications. This was certainly not good news for the Tibetans, whose expertise lay in cavalry charges. Daluan Ruozhen suddenly raised his head toward the summit. Wang Yan, Shenyu Zhongtong, come out and speak with me. Kakakakaka. The creaking of mechanisms responded to Daluan Ruozhen's words. Countless ballistae probed out from behind the steel walls, their bolts gleaming with cold light. All of them were aimed at Daluan Ruozhen. Protect the Tibetan Great Minister. With a burst of shouts and bangs, several dozen Mengshi Zhao soldiers wielding large shields charged out of the army and quickly stood in front of Daluan Ruozhen. The fate of Mengshi Zhao was currently tied to Yusang, so Zheluofeng had long ago given the order that the important figures from Yusang needed to be protected no matter what. That's enough. Daluan Ruozhen waved his hands. Just when he was about to say more, a voice came from the summit. Daluan Ruozhen, there's no need for all the trouble. Just say what you need to say. We'll listen from here. Despite the distance, Shenyu Zhongtong's forceful and articulate voice could still be clearly heard. The troops on the summit parted as two mighty figures emerged. Wang Yan and Shenyu Zhongtong. In the fierce winds, these two commanders of the Great Tang were fully equipped for battle. Standing on the summit, their towering figures seemed like gods, inspiring awe and respect. Ha 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 ha, Brother Wang, Brother Shenyu, we meet again. The two of you are truly skillful, establishing these walls in such a short time. If my guess is correct, this should be the handiwork of that little brother Wang Chong, who last night managed to defeat us. As they say, we can't get to know each other unless we fight. Before the battle, can I meet that little brother of yours who managed to defeat us twice? A harsh light flashed through Daluan Ruozen's eyes with these last words. And behind Daluan Ruozen, Jiasiluo, Fenjie, Duan Gachuan, and Jeluofeng also began to look up. The army of the 500,000 instantly became much quieter. Although Wang Chong's identity had been determined long ago, not even Fenjie or Jiasiluo had ever gotten a very clear view of him before. Inexplicably, the two began to hold a completely different attitude toward Wang Chong. These people. On the summit, Wang Yan and Shenyu Zhongtong's minds were in turmoil at Daluan Ruozen's words. For Yu Sang and Meng Shizhao to realize Wang Chong's existence was not difficult. After all, they had clashed last night. But for them to even know his name and status was far too surprising. Even Wang Chong, standing behind Wang Yan and Shenyu Zhongtong, felt rather agitated. I didn't think that I would be exposed so quickly. Wang Chong took in a deep breath as he looked down with deep apprehension at that figure standing at the base of the mountain. I knew that fellow was hard to deal with, but this is far more troublesome than I imagined. In any generation, Daluan Ruozen would always be extremely hard to deal with. And Wang Chong had never interacted with Daluan Ruozen before. This fellow has never even seen me, but he managed to expose my identity with a single sentence. This is truly too frightening. If possible, I have to kill him as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he's bound to be a powerful foe for the Great Tang. Father, Lord Shenyu Zhongtong, Daluan Ruozen is probing to see if his guess is right. It's fine. He won't be able to turn up anything about me. See what he wants to say, Wang Chong suddenly said. If one discarded their completely opposing standpoints, Wang Chong was actually quite curious about this Yusang great minister who had single-handedly caused the Southwestern War. Speaking from a general standpoint, even dying in battle against such a foe was still a great honor. Wang Yan and Shenyu Zhongtong didn't know what Wang Chong was thinking. As they looked down the mountain at the generals of Meng Shizhao and Yusang, their entire bodies were fraught with tension. Great minister, say whatever it is you want to say. My humble son is still too young to receive great minister's praise. Wang Yan suddenly said, his voice as sonorous as a great bell. At the base of the mountain, the eyes of the Mengshi Yusang army gleamed for a moment. Wang Yan's words had clearly once more affirmed Daluan Ruozen's abilities. Ha 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 ha, Brother Wang. A straightforward person does not make implications. The Great Tang Imperial Court won't be sending reinforcements. The forces you have at your disposal are simply no match for us. This being the case, why not surrender? Perhaps there would still be a chance for you to survive. Daluan Ruozen waved his fan and faintly smiled at the summit. Daluan Ruozen's words only made Wang Yan furrow his brow. But behind him, Wang Chong couldn't help but shiver. This Daluan Ruozen is quite crafty. At this stage, there's no more room for the Great Tang, Meng Shizhao, and Yusang to back out. Someone like him has to understand this point. It doesn't matter to him if Father or Shenyu Zhongtong agree to his proposal. His goal is to stir confusion and lower the morale of the army. Wang Chong swept over the troops with his eyes. Just as expected, a few subtle changes were taking place in the once united morale of the army. Although their resolve could not be described as weakening, and they certainly wouldn't actually surrender, there was no doubt that their morale had fallen from its exuberant heights. The minds of men are a delicate thing. No matter the situation, as long as there's the smallest sliver of hope, one won't give it up, even if they know this sliver of hope doesn't actually exist. This is how the subconscious works. This is the instinctive response. Wang Chong mentally sighed. The superior person would use words to move the human heart, but the intelligent person didn't care if one was moved. They would achieve their goals regardless. This was Wang Chong's first time seeing this great minister of the Ngari royal lineage. But in this single meeting, Wang Chong immediately realized that Daluan Ruozen was far more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. A heavy sword has no edge, and great skill lies in simplicity. A person like Daluan Ruozen has a certain aim with his every move. A few simple words were enough to deal a blow to the army's morale. If this person doesn't die, he'll be a major problem for the Great Tang. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. His father's personality was not suitable to fight with a mouth like Daluan Ruozen's. Wang Chong's eyes quickly turned to Shenyu Zhongtong. My lord. Wang Chong suddenly took a few steps forward and began to whisper. Ha ha ha. Since ancient times, the defeated general has always surrendered to the victorious general. I've never heard of the victorious general surrendering to the defeated general. Yusang has always claimed that its cavalry is invincible as it vies to dominate the world. But even in an advantageous situation, Yusang was not only no match for us, it even lost 50,000 soldiers. How could this army be one worth surrendering to? Daluan Ruozhen, don't you think you've overestimated yourself too much? Yesterday was 50,000. How many do you think you will lose today? Shenyu Zhongtong's roaring laughter echoed through the heavens. Bastard! Daluan Ruozhen said nothing, but Jia Siluo, Fenjie, and Long Qinba turned purple with rage. Shenyu Zhongtong's words clearly referred to their defeats from last night. Don't worry about him. He's intentionally trying to enrage you. Look around. Daluan Ruozhen sternly warned. This note of caution caused them all to momentarily slow. Subconsciously, they looked around and saw that the morale of their troops had clearly been affected. For a moment they were all speechless. It was clear that this had been a type of psychological attack. Humph! Daluan Ruozhen coldly snorted and quickly raised his head to look back at the summit. Shenyu Zhongtong, good or bad, you're still the Grand Protector General of the Anan Protectorate. When did you start acting as a spokesperson for someone else? You should just have that boy Wang Chong behind you come on out. Wang Chong and Shenyu Zhongtong both felt their hearts grow cold. Daluan Ruozhen had an extremely sharp sense. With just a glance, he had noticed the truth. Humph, Daluan Ruozhen, the both of us should stop playing around with these word tricks. Do you still want to rely on your lips to settle a battle? If you have the capability, you should just prove it on the battlefield. There was no need for Wang Chong to offer words this time as Shenyu Zhongtong shot back with a cold retort. Upon hearing this, Daluan Ruozhen looked away and began to walk back into the rear. Since this is the case, I'll grant your wish. How is it? In a place a few steps away, Huashu Huaizong and Zheluofeng swiftly paced up to meet Daluan Ruozhen. That brat is harder to deal with than I had imagined, and more cautious as well. For someone like Shenyu Zhongtong to be so obedient was truly beyond my expectations. In such a short amount of time, it seems that child has managed to take complete control over the army. Wang Yan and Shenyu Zhongtong even seem willing to assist him as his aides. This is truly foul news. Daluan Ruozhen creased his brow as he spoke. His original intention had been to see Wang Chong and see if his conjectures were true. He hadn't expected Wang Chong to not come out at all, but Daluan Ruozhen could do nothing about that. Although he already knew Wang Chong's identity, without seeing him, he wouldn't be able to sound him out and determine what sort of person Wang Chong was. All of you have to be careful. This child is going to be very troublesome. Might Great Minister be overestimating him too much? Zheluofeng frowned. He could admit that Wang Chong might be different from normal teenagers. After all, a normal teenager would never be able to give the Tibetan cavalry such a thorough beating. But even the most formidable teenager was still a teenager. Even if he had some legacy or military text, he was still a teenager. Zheluofeng felt like Daluan Ruozhen was placing him on too high of a pedestal. Humph, I actually hope I've overestimated him. But as for what he's really like, we'll find out soon. Daluan Ruozhen left with a flick of his sleeve. I don't believe that you can keep hiding forever. Daluan Ruozhen quickly vanished into the crowd. The matter behind him no longer had anything to do with him. It was now time for generals like Huashu Huaizong and Duan Guchuan to step onto the stage. A moment ago, why didn't you show yourself? At almost the same time, on the summit, Shenyu Zhongtong turned to look confusedly at Wang Chong. Daluan Ruozhen had mentioned by name that he wanted to see Wang Chong. Yet Wang Chong had elected to remain hidden. Although Shenyu Zhongtong didn't think there was a need for Wang Chong to see Daluan Ruozhen, he still felt like Wang Chong had been intentionally hiding behind him. Even from Shenyu Zhongtong's standpoint, this didn't seem necessary. No! In a place where the Mengshi Yusang army couldn't see, Wang Chong shook his head, caution on his face. Daluan Ruozhen is an extremely formidable individual. Although it's not obvious from his appearance, His every move has a deeper meaning. Daluan Ruozan knows this entire army like the back of his hand, including Father and Lord Protector General, so he can target all of you based on your personalities. The Art of War said it well. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. In this entire army, the only person that Daluan Ruozan doesn't understand is me. The less he knows about me, the more cautious he will be and the less recklessly he'll act. This way, the only person you'll have to deal with is Huashu Huaitsong. But if he also knows me like the back of his hand, things will be completely different. Don't forget, Yusang's Ngari royal lineage has always paired one civil and one military official, one minister and one general, and they've always helped each other succeed. They're like two walls pressing up against our great Tang. When dealing with someone like this, it's not possible to be overly cautious, Wang Chong said with an incredibly wary expression. Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong might not be able to see it, but Wang Chong was well aware that in this battle, Daluan Ruozan presented a far greater threat than Huashu Huaitsong or Duan Guchuan. Any underestimation of this Yusang great minister would only be a detriment to oneself. Father, Lord Xinyu, the Tibetans and the Mengshi Zhao soldiers are about to attack. I leave the rest up to you too, Wang Chong said. As Wang Chong brought up this matter, both Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong began to focus. Although Daluan Ruozan had attempted a psychological attack with his advice to surrender, he was not their actual opponent. The lives of 100,000 soldiers and nearly 1 million civilians were tied to this battle. I'm going down first. With a flick of his cape, Xinyu Zhongtong descended the mountain. Although his strategy and tactics were not suitable for him to be a commander-in-chief, he was also overqualified to be a general. Moreover, the metal slabs Wang Chong had used to set up the defense made it seem like city walls lining a mountain. This was precisely the terrain that Xinyu Zhongtong was skilled in defending. And in terms of understanding of the Annan Protectorate army, no one could compare to Xinyu Zhongtong. In the Battle of Irai, if Xinyu Zhongtong hadn't had to leave the city he was defending, stripping himself of his expertise to launch an attack on a terrain not at all suitable to his skill set, Zheliuofeng might not have been able to inflict such grievous losses. By leaving, Xinyu Zhongtong was clearly expressing his stance. He was truly leaving the empire's southwest to Wang Chong. With Xinyu Zhongtong gone, only Wang Yan and his son were left on the summit. Chong-er, although I didn't hope for you to appear here, our Wang clan is still a clan of ministers and generals. Whether one is a minister or general, our duty is to devote ourselves to the empire, to the great Tang. Since you have talent in the art of war, don't waste it. Your father believes in you. Wang Yan turned and faced Wang Chong as he spoke. His eyes were suffused with complex emotions, but even more anticipation. At this stage of the Southwestern War, everyone was looking forward to Wang Chong's performance. At the very least, both Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong had already lost to him. Yes, father. Wang Chong clenched his fists, his heart deeply moved. He had once dreamed about fighting alongside his father, but those had been dreams that could never be fulfilled. Although his father had always encouraged him to join the army, his strict personality forbade his son from joining him on the front lines. Given his father's nature, for him to say such words and be so certain of him was already quite decent. Wang Yan quickly took his leave. Like Xinyu Zhongtong, Wang Yan had also gone to command the army. In the 100,000 Tang soldiers, besides the 60,000 some Annan Protectorate army soldiers, the rest were the troops that Wang Yan had commanded and the reinforcements sent by the imperial court. Although Wang Yan didn't understand the Annan Protectorate army, in commanding these soldiers, not even Xinyu Zhongtong could compare to him. There was probably no one in the world except Wang Chong who could get these two elite defensive generals to wholeheartedly submit themselves. Boom! The mournful horns accompanied the beating of drums rising from the enemy camp. The earth quaked as the dense ranks of the Mengshi Yusang army began to move like some primordial beast. A powerful killing intent rose from the void and quickly shrouded the entire battlefield. Zhang Shouji, get ready. The final step. At the same time, on the summit, Wang Chong swung down his right hand and gave his final order. CRSSSH. Pour. On the summit, the hundreds of craftsmen and sword smiths began to open large metal boxes. With a rustle, countless metal caltrops rolled out of the boxes, filling a region around 20 zhang wide along the mountain. These caltrops were covered in sharp points, the longest measuring several feet, the shortest 5 or 6 inches. These caltrops of various sizes formed a thick carpet as they poured down the mountain, filling out the last gap in the summit's defenses. The battle had finally begun. Nay! Horses neighed in the roaring winds. Once the conversation between Shenyu Zhongtong and Daluan Ruozhen concluded, the entire mountain was surrounded in turbulent air currents and an extremely tense atmosphere. The neighing of war horses, the thundering of war drums, and the blaring of horns all served to bring the tension to its peak. Though the faces of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers were obscured under their helmets, the tightness with which they gripped their pikes revealed their true emotions. Nearby, the Tibetan soldiers who were famed for their ferocity and courage were doing no better. Their constantly blinking eyes amply revealed the unease of these soldiers of the plateau. The Great Tang at its full flourish had left an indelible impression on Yusang. When they were still children, they had heard tales about how the Great Tang soldiers had killed their way onto the plateau, even getting close to the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple for a time. But that was a matter from very long ago, and even the emperor had been a different one. The Tibetans had originally forgotten about these memories. Just yesterday they had even been laughing at the Tang. But the 50,000 deaths had made these eagles of the plateau remember their past sorrows. Although no one believed that the Annan Protectorate army could defeat the 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army, there was no doubt that it was an opponent worthy of their respect. Move out! Daluan Ruozhen, Huashu Huaitsong, Duan Gechuan, and Zheluofeng, the 4 leaders of the Mengshi Yusang army, lined up their horses and faced the mountain, swiftly issuing the order to attack. Kai Il! Their cries shook the heavens as the earth quaked. Thousands of fully armored soldiers, as vast as the sea, began to surge toward the final stronghold of the Great Tang. Surprisingly, however, the first wave of attackers did not consist of the pugnacious Tibetan cavalry, but the soldiers of Mengshi Zhao. Ready! Shields! With a set of sharp signals, massive steel shields were suddenly raised to the sky like countless fish scales. At the same time, there was a clattering of metal as war halos began to emerge from these large shields. The halo of tenacity, the halo of defense, the black iron halo, the tempering halo, the charging halo, the attack halo. Thousands of halos began to resonate, their sounds mixing together. In an instant, an enormous fighting intent exploded out of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers. And in the sky above the shield-bearing soldiers, space began to twist as the image of a massive stone began to manifest, shining with a milky white light. When this massive stone appeared, the Mengshi Zhao army took on a completely different tone. It seemed to become much steadier and weightier. The white stone core. As Wang Chong looked down from the summit and saw that white stone slowly manifest over the Mengshi Zhao soldiers on the front line, his expression instantly turned grave. Zheluofeng is burning with ambition, and he's truly been training quite the number of soldiers in these last few years. The quality of these soldiers is still lacking when compared to the Annan Protectorate army, but they're already quite similar in a few aspects. The Whitestone Corps was one of the elite corps that Zheluofeng had trained. Although Wang Chong had never encountered it before, it had a thunderous reputation. These soldiers had played no small part in the Battle of Arai. The Whitestone Corps was also the largest of Mengshi Zhao's army corps, numbering 100,000. Rumble. The world quaked as the tidy infantry ranks of the Whitestone Corps began to divide into squares. Through a slow but steady march, they began to approach the summit from all sides. Upon seeing this, both Wang Chong and the other commanders on the mountain couldn't help but widen their eyes. In both their marching style and use of shields, Mengshi Zhao's Whitestone Corps is acting almost exactly like an army of the Great Tang. Back then, the sage emperor in his kindness provided Mengshi Zhao with many things, including methods to train soldiers and knowledge of formations. But now, Zheluofeng is using these things to deal with the Great Tang. This fellow has truly put a lot of thought into his schemes. As Wang Chong's sleeves flapped in the wind, his mind was buzzing with thoughts. With this similar style of army, Zheluofeng's understanding of the Great Tang, and the fact that the Tang were fighting on foreign territory, It was no wonder that the Anan Protectorate army had suffered such a devastating defeat. Alas, Zhelyuefeng, you encountered me. As he looked down the mountain, Wang Chong's eyes turned cold and hard. The art of war was about confusing the false and the true. If Zhelyuefeng truly believed that just by defeating the Great Tang once, he could defeat them twice, then he was making a grave mistake. Get ready! Raising his right hand, Wang Chong swiftly gave his first order. With this order, the air began to rumble as halo after dazzling halo began to ripple out from the mountain. The 100,000 Tang soldiers began to unleash their different halos. Their forces stretched from the summit to the base, all of them behind the layers of steel walls. In a flash, the original mountain disappeared, replaced by a mountain of steel formed from men and walls. Killing intent and dangerous energies roiled around the mountain, and the great Tang army exuded a dignified and somber air. All of these soldiers exuded the odor that could only come from well-trained soldiers who had experienced hundreds of battles, the smell of emotionless iron and blood. Anyone who saw this army would be able to feel that hair-raising strength and demeanor. These thousands of soldiers stood like solemn statues, none of them making a noise, as if all of them were part of the same body. The strength of thousands had fused into one. This sort of quality was not something an ordinary army could achieve. At this moment, the 100,000 Tang soldiers on the summit were showing traces of that great Tang which had once swept through the world without equal. More than 100,000 soldiers of the Anan Protectorate army had died in the Battle of Irai, but the soldiers that remained had not only failed to crumble, they had grown even stronger. These people. At the base of the mountain, the Mengshi Yusang commanders couldn't help but widen their eyes at this sight. Even though they stood on opposing sides, they had to admit that the Great Tang's systematic training produced high-quality soldiers that probably not even the Tibetans could match. If it weren't for the fact that cavalry were naturally superior to infantry and the fact that Yusang possessed the most cavalry, the Southwestern War might have ended with a completely different result. Fight! 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 As they roared, the thousands of soldiers of the Whitestone Corps used the cover of their shields to slowly approach. From the mountain came the creaking of countless mechanisms. While the Mengshi army was rapidly advancing, the Tang army remained as unmoving as statues. Their cold and bright gazes continued to stare down the mountain. This combination of movement and stillness only seemed to increase the pressure. 50 zhang, 40 zhang, 30 zhang, 20 zhang. The air was fraught with tension. Whether it was on the summit or at the base of the mountain, whether Tang, Mengshi, or Tibetan, all the commanders had focused their attention on the place where the lines of the army would first clash. Finally, boom! With a massive boom, the front ranks of the Whitestone Corps finally met with the Tang ranks and fell into a melee. Kai-il! Kai-il! Soldiers on both sides bellowed. In the instant the two armies clashed, Mengshi Zhao and Great Tang soldiers were cut down like stalks of wheat. Such was the harvest. From the very start, the battle had reached an extremely intense and callous state. Press forward. Without waiting for the battle to develop, Zhelyuefeng sent another wave forward with a wave of his hand, and tens of thousands of soldiers of the Whitestone Corps marched into the fray. The clash of shield against shield, steel against steel, rang out as the dense ranks collided. Press forward. The second wave had barely arrived and Zhelyuefeng was already sending his third wave of troops sweeping forward. Don't give them a chance to rest. Duan Wuzong. Go up there and personally hold the line. Yes, Your Majesty. At Zhelyuefeng's side, a heroic general carrying a white tasseled spear urged his horse forward. This was the commander of the Whitestone Corps, Duan Wuzong, and he was also Mengshi Zhao Great General Duan Guchuan's cousin. He was the one who had trained the Whitestone Corps to its current level. From this action of sending out Duan Wuzong so early, one could see the importance Zhelyuefeng placed on this battle. Bang 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 bang. The air resounded with the rumbling of halos as they overlapped and incessantly pressed forward. In a few short moments, the great Tang soldiers on the outermost perimeter of the mountain were put under enormous pressure. Each inch of ground had multiple members of the Whitestone Corps charging into it. Massive halos of thorns intersected with each other. Their rumbling and clattering mixed in with the endless cries of battle. Feng used no other strategy than that of sheer numbers to push and press against the Anan Protectorate army garrisoned on the mountain. In a one-on-one matchup, a soldier of the Whitestone Corps was no match for a soldier of the Anan Protectorate army, not in strength, speed, or dexterity. But when their numbers reached a certain level, this quantitative change would affect a qualitative change, and everything would be different. Let's see how they do. At the base of the mountain, Zheluo Feng, Huoshu Huizong, and Daluan Ruozhen quietly watched on, everyone waiting in anticipation for the Anan Protectorate army's reaction. The rows of steel walls on the mountain seemed like an imposing fortress, a castle that wasn't a castle. Not even people with Zheluo Feng's or Huoshu Huizong's experiences had ever encountered such a situation before. Neither of the pair could grasp Wang Chong's strategy. This first wave was just a test. What do you think they will do? Zheluo Feng suddenly asked. What they'll do? We'll find out soon. Huoshu Huizong squinted as he spoke. These two powerhouses of the Southwest, enemies yet not enemies, friends yet not friends, in Zhangzhou Jianxiong's generation had always suppressed each other. But after Zhangzhou Jianxiong, these two had suddenly stood together to deal with the Great Tang. The Whitestone Corps is a corps that I trained to have an extremely formidable defense. No matter what sort of tricks they have, their effects will all be greatly reduced against the Whitestone Corps. As long as we can shatter the Anan Protectorate army's defense and annihilate them, the Great Tang's southwest will be ours for the taking. This will be our final battle. Zheluo Feng looked up to the summit as he spoke. It was the last battle. Once these enemies before him were eliminated, the southwest would be a world that belonged to Yusang and Meng Shizhao. At this moment, not even Zheluo Feng could conceal his agitation. All that he had anticipated would become reality on the morrow. Don't get too careless, Huoshu Huizong chided from the side. What? With our 500,000 soldiers, do you think that we can't destroy their remaining forces? Zheluo Feng asked, his brow furrowed. Huoshu Huizong was an Yusang great general and incomparably valiant. Zheluo Feng had originally believed that he would agree with his point of view. To his surprise, Huoshu Huizong had taken a stance that he would have never imagined. I didn't say that we wouldn't destroy them. I am only saying that we need to show the appropriate level of caution. I feel that things won't proceed as smoothly as we imagine, Huoshu Huizong calmly said. For some reason, Huoshu Huizong had an ill foreboding that he couldn't shake off. Perhaps it was because that Tang person on the summit was too quiet. Perhaps it was because the Anan Protectorate army had been retreating all this time but had seemed to stop here solely because of this mountain. In short, maintain an appropriate level of vigilance. We just can't get careless. Bang bang bang. On the slopes, shield clashed against shield in an unending din. Kai-il! Kai-il! The thousands of Whitestone Corps soldiers roared as they pressed forward. Hold! Hold! The Anan Protectorate army was constantly being pushed back, its shield soldiers constantly retreating. Bang bang! The rocks under their feet shattered as a massive pressure pushed these soldiers on the front line into the dirt and rock of the mountain face. The collapse of the front line seemed like only a matter of time. Crack! The grinding of shield on shield made one's teeth ache, and the Great Tang infantry all had red faces from the effort they were putting forth. At the base of the mountain, Zheluo Feng, Duan Gechuan, Fenjie, Daluan Ruozhen, and Huoshu Huizong were all looking up at the summit. Once the Great Tang front line could no longer hold, their soldiers would all surge, availing themselves of the mountain to cleave their way to the summit and take care of all the Tang soldiers. It's about time. As Wang Chong observed the melee from the summit, watching the Great Tang tussle with the Meng Shizhao and Tibetan soldiers, his gaze slowly turned harsh. Zheluo Feng and Huoshu Huizong were using the Whitestone Corps to sound him out. But Wang Chong was sounding them out as well. Boom! With a swing of his right hand, the situation changed in a way that the Mengshi Yusang army did not expect. Right when the Anan Protectorate army seemed to be reaching its breaking point, boom! All the Tang soldiers on the outermost perimeter suddenly retreated, thousands of soldiers rushing further into the mountain. Buzz! It was so sudden that the Whitestone Corps soldiers farthest back were dumbfounded. What's going on here? Zheluo Feng slightly paled at this sudden change. Although he hoped to see the Anan Protectorate army fail, this sort of utter collapse was occurring far earlier than he had expected. But before he had time to think, all the soldiers of the Whitestone Corps were already surging forward. Wait! Zheluofeng wanted to say more, but it was already too late. Thousands of soldiers were already charging forward, their formations completely ruined. Kill! Slaughter them all! Kill these Tang and the Southwest will be our world. The sight of the Anan Protectorate army fleeing had made them all go crazy. With the Tang in front and the Whitestone Corps behind, the two sides began to play out a pursuit drama. Yet none of them noticed that though the soldiers on the front lines had begun to retreat, the great Tang soldiers on the summit had remained steadfast. Begin! With the wave of a right hand, the left and right flanks roared to life. Before these countless Whitestone Corps soldiers could react, countless Tang soldiers were charging in. Bang! 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 Yet the first wave was not the great Tang infantry, but the sounds of thousands of ballistae. These ballistae had all been concealed behind the steel walls such that they were impossible to see from the base of the mountain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Cold lights flashed in the air as these ballista bolts, harbingers of death, thundered toward the soldiers of the Whitestone Corps. There was no time to dodge as the Whitestone Corps was cut down like waves of wheat. Their roiling stellar energy and halos of thorns were utterly incapable of stopping the ballista bolts. Aya! Screams filled the air as thousands of Whitestone Corps soldiers were felled by the assault. Each ballista bolt had run through 10 to 20 soldiers. In normal circumstances, the large shields they wielded would have mollified the damage of these ballistae. However, as they charged, they had clumped together, leaving them no space for such maneuvers. And their dense ranks were now perfect for the ballista bolts to display their maximum power. Retreat! Retreat! Run! They have ballistae! It's a trap! Hurry! Retreat! The soldiers instantly fell into chaos. Raise shields! Raise shields! Raise shields! The officers of the Whitestone Corps began to holler out their orders, but it was too late. Boom! Just as one of these Whitestone Corps officers was yelling his orders, the air shrieked as a massive axe spun through the air and cleaved into his skull. Kai-il! War cries rose up from all around. The shield soldiers at the front lines of the Anan Protectorate army had already retreated, but at this moment, countless axe soldiers suddenly appeared and began to charge. Massive axes glimmered with a somber light that could cause anyone to widen their eyes in shock. Bang! 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 The flying axes howled through the air like drops of rain as they hacked into the ranks of the Whitestone Corps. Bang! 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 Countless Whitestone Corps soldiers dropped to the ground like felled trees, their bodies thudding into pools of blood. Hold! 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 The Whitestone Corps commanders in the rear urgently and frenziedly cried out. The Anan Protectorate army soldiers pressing in from their left and right weren't numerous. At the very least, the Whitestone Corps far outnumbered them. As long as they could resist the frenzied assault of the Anan Protectorate army, the situation could still be altered. It's too late. On the summit, Wang Chong revealed a sliver of a cold smile as he watched on. The armies of this era were still focused on advantages in numbers, knowing nothing about the true art of battle. No matter what army they belonged to or how powerful they were, as long as one soldier saw another charging, they would charge as well. At that point, the army was no better than a mob. They were simply no match for their well-trained opponents who were retreating and attacking as a cohesive unit. Bang! 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 That brief victory on the battlefield quickly transformed into a one-sided slaughter. Thousands of soldiers from the Anan Protectorate army charging down from the summit were running right over the Whitestone Corps. In a short time, this test had become a complete reversal. Retreat! Withdraw! At the base of the mountain, the Whitestone Corps commander Duan Wuzong's face had twisted into a nasty grimace. He was the one who had trained the Whitestone Corps, but not even he had imagined the battle to turn out like this. Pass on my order to immediately commit the reserve soldiers, Duan Wuzong roared in rage. But before Duan Wuzong could apply his reserve soldiers, right when the great Tang soldiers had reached the base of the mountain, the pursuit suddenly stopped. The thousands of soldiers suddenly came to a complete halt, as if there was some invisible line there. All the soldiers acted uniformly as if they were part of a single person. The spearmen and axemen retreated to the rear while the shield soldiers halted their retreat and reassumed their places on the front line. Clang 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 clang. Once more, metal shields taller than a man gleamed with cold light as they were erected like walls at the base of the mountain. With shield soldiers in front and spearmen in the back, the battlefield had returned to its former state, as if nothing had happened. Other than the corpse-covered ground, there was no proof that any battle had taken place. Silence. Absolute silence. Zheluo Feng and Daluan Ruozhen stared at the well-disciplined and cohesive Anan Protectorate army with incredibly nasty grimaces. On the side, Huashu Huaizong narrowed his eyes, his expression turning solemn. In last night's battle, he had fallen for Wang Chong's scheme to lure the tiger from the mountain. In the entire process, he had also been suffering from Wang Chong's schemes, as Wang Chong had never once used his cavalry in a frontal confrontation. By the time Huashu Huaizong had reached the battlefield, the Anan Protectorate army would have already safely retreated. This was the first time Huashu Huaizong was seeing Wang Chong command a proper battle. In this battle, neither side had yet mobilized their entire army. The Mengshi Yusang army had only put forward a portion of the Whitestone Corps, and this was no reflection of their actual strength. But on the mountain, the Tang army had also only utilized their soldiers at the base. From the middle of the mountain up, the rest of the Tang army remained unmoving. Even at that battle's most intense point, they had not moved a single muscle. There was no doubt that in this probing battle, the Mengshi Yusang side had suffered a major defeat. Bastard! Zheluo Feng stared at the Tang army on the mountain, his entire body shaking in rage. The Whitestone Corps was one of the elite corps that he had trained, and he had had high hopes of Duan Wuzong. He hadn't expected that they would be so easily defeated, and in front of Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaizong as well. What is that bastard doing? Zheluo Feng couldn't hold back his rage. In last night's battle, the Tibetans had suffered 2 grievous defeats and lost more than 50,000 soldiers. Zheluo Feng had acted like this was nothing, that he didn't mind, but there was no way for him to not actually care. What difference was there between Duan Wuzong's performance and the Tibetans? And to do it in front of Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaizong, wasn't this pushing his face into the dirt? There's no need for your majesty to be angry. This was only a test. It doesn't mean anything. Daluan Ruozhen shook his head and continued. Huashu Huaizong, this is your field. What are your thoughts? After saying this, he turned to face Huashu Huaizong. It took a while for Huashu Huaizong to speak, and his expression was exceptionally focused. This brat isn't simple. Under his command, the Anan Protectorate army is a completely different army. I'm afraid that this battle will be rather troublesome. Ah! Daluan Ruozhen couldn't help but arch his brows at these words. His confident smile was no more. Daluan Ruozhen had worked with Huashu Huaizong for many years, and he had rarely seen this sort of expression, much less heard the word troublesome from his lips. Huashu Huaizong had a fierce personality that hungered for battle. When encountering a formidable opponent, he would only think about how to defeat them, not about whether they were troublesome. Is this brat really this formidable? Daluan Ruozhen's brow slowly began to crease. He truly didn't understand military affairs that much, but if Huashu Huaizong was acting this cautiously, then things were completely different. Congratulations to user for killing 8,700 Mengshi Zhao soldiers. Meanwhile, the mood on the summit was completely different. Right when the battle had ended, a familiar voice had sounded out like dew descending from the heavens. Before the battlefield had cleared up, Wang Chong had already known the Mengshi Zhao losses. In these few moments, the Mengshi Zhao army had lost more than 8,000 soldiers. Wonderful! Chen Shusun said from the side as he looked excitedly down at the silent Mengshi Yusang army below. It was hard to blame Chen Shusun for his lack of self-control. Mengshi Zhao and Yusang had come with a powerful momentum, their 500,000 soldiers stretching onto the horizon, covering the land and exerting an enormous pressure. Though they didn't show it on the surface, everyone, including Chen Shusun, felt this pressure. The Anan Protectorate army had lost in the southwest far too many times. This battle held a major significance. If they had suffered defeat in this first round, the Mengshi Yusang army wouldn't even need to charge up the mountain for the morale of the Tang army to crumble. They were already outnumbered. A defeat in the first clash would have destructive consequences for morale. But as long as they could win, things were completely different. The two commanders of the army, Shen Yuzhongtong and Wang Yan, had done nothing, and the majority of the army had not even participated in the battle. This was already an expression of strength. Wang Chong only faintly smiled in response. This was just an initial test that really didn't count for anything. Alas, it was just a little lacking. This thought crossed Wang Chong's mind as he looked down the mountain. For every 10,000 enemy soldiers he killed, Wang Chong would get a 500-soldier increase in the number of soldiers he could lose. 8,700 soldiers was clearly still some distance from 10,000. Pass on my order. Tell them to not get careless. This was only a test. The battle is still far from starting. Wang Chong said. This first clash was extremely important, as it related to the morale of the army. His forces were already lacking in numbers, and if their morale was poor as well, then this battle would already be lost. But 8,700 kills was merely a drop in the ocean for the 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army, not even enough to stir some froth in this massive army. In addition, they absolutely can't let down their guard. The Mengshi Yusang army has imperial great generals Huashu Huaizong and Duan Gechuan commanding it, and neither of them has yet moved. Chun Shusun bowed and solemnly replied, "Yes, young master. Your subordinate understands. I will pass on young master's orders." The 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army and the two great generals Huashu Huaizong and Duan Gechuan, who had yet to move, meant that the situation truly was still grim. It was far from the time to be happy. As Wang Chong looked down at the somewhat restless Mengshi Yusang army, he suddenly ordered, "It's about time. Pass on my order to make ready to execute the second plan. Zheluofeng and Daluan Ruozhen are probably going to move soon." The winds howled, and the air over the battlefield was far more intense than one could imagine. Zheluofeng and Daluan Ruozhen acted faster than Wang Chong had expected. Just as Wang Chong had suspected, those 8,000-some casualties were no mortal wound to the vast Mengshi Yusang army. "Get ready," Zheluofeng said, his expression cold and hard. "Tell Duan Wuzong to commit the entirety of the Whitestone Corps. The remnants of the Anan Protectorate army don't even reach 100,000. I don't believe that my 100,000 soldiers of the Whitestone Corps can't make an opening in the Anan Protectorate army. Yes, your subordinate will comply with this order." "Wait a moment. Tell Duan Wuzong to lead the army himself this time," Zheluofeng coldly ordered. The Anan Protectorate army had not even used 70% of its manpower, having mobilized only the troops at the base of the mountain. In these circumstances, Duan Wuzong had still suffered a major defeat, incurring Zheluofeng's extreme displeasure. "Tell Duan Wuzong that if the Tang army retreats, don't rashly pursue. Not unless he's confirmed that the Tang army really is fleeing." Suddenly, a cold and emotionless voice rang out in everyone's ears. "Yes, my lord." Before anyone else could react, the bodyguard responsible for delivering the message went stiff. Hurriedly clasping his hands, he gave a deferential bow, an expression of dread on his face. This voice even seemed to cause the surrounding temperature to drop. This Duan Gechuan has a rather good eye, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Near Zheluofeng, nobody noticed a strange light flash through the eyes of Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaizong. This great Tang youth called Wang Chong used an art of war that was completely different from any art of war that these two knew about. Armies competed in terms of sharpness and courage, seeking to break through the opponent's defense. For someone to intentionally show signs of weakness and retreat, then use this opportunity to launch an attack, was a tactic that none of them had ever seen or heard of. Not even Daluan Ruozhen or Huashu Huaizong, with all their experience as powerhouses of the Southwest, had ever experienced such a thing. Mengshi Zhao's great general, Duan Gechuan, had remained behind the curtains all this time, revealing little of his prowess. But just like Daluan Ruozan and Huoshu Huaitsong, he had managed to notice that the Whitestone Corps' defeat had arisen from the intentional show of weakness. However, Duan Gechuan only said these words before resuming his silent stance behind Zheluofeng, transforming once more into a lifeless sculpture. Boom boom boom. War drums thundered as the front ranks of the vast Mengshi army once more began to slowly advance toward the mountain base. In a few short moments, the Whitestone Corps had once more divided itself into orderly squares surrounding the mountain. All soldiers, hear my order. Rolling stone formation. With this resounding voice, a stalwart and well-built figure rode forward on his horse, his hand holding a sword high into the air. And as Duan Wuzong's voice rang through the air, soldiers exuding a majestic aura began to walk out of the ranks and to the very front of the army. The commanders of the Whitestone Corps had all walked to the very front of the army. Boom! With a metallic clatter, a halo of thorns the color of white jade began to expand from under the hooves of Duan Wuzong's horse to the other soldiers of the Whitestone Corps. As if this was some sort of signal, halos of thorns began to expand from the other officers of the Whitestone Corps to boost the strength of the entire army. These countless halos reverberated, uniting into a single whole. The energy of the 100,000 soldiers of the Whitestone Corps melded into one. With a buzz, space began to twist as this vast and dazzling energy once more manifested into that massive white stone. Fight! 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 With these heaven-shaking roars, the Whitestone Corps once more began to press toward the summit like a moving wall. This time, however, the Whitestone Corps was clearly advancing much more slowly. But the pressure and momentum they exuded had only increased. Duan Wuzong. On the slope, the commanders of the Anan Protectorate Army began to frown. The offensive power of the Whitestone Corps was definitely not the strongest of the Mengshi Army's corps, but it had the most formidable defense. The Battle of Arai had already taught them this harsh lesson. And as the leader of the Whitestone Corps, the one who had molded it into an army in the style of the Great Tang, Duan Wuzong, had long ago become the target of the entire Anan Protectorate Army. This was especially the case when one remembered that it was the commander of the Anan Protectorate Army who had first taught Meng Shijiao all this. One could easily imagine how they felt now that the methods they had taught were now being used against them. Duan Wuzong, I'll take you on. In a flash, a pitch-black horse, abnormally spirited and at least one size bigger than an ordinary warhorse, jumped out from the middle of the mountain, crossing 7 or 8 zhang with a single leap. Rumble! Leaving behind a trail of dust and the blazing light of his halo of thorns, that general of the Anan Protectorate Army descended the mountain. As he moved forward, a massive halo of thorns began to swiftly expand in front of him. General Zhao, I'll help you. Buzz. Soon after, one commander after another of the Anan Protectorate Army began to follow him, charging down the slope, leaving behind trails of dust. Wang Chong's brows rose as he turned his head and asked, "Who is that person?" He had only requested that a sufficiently ranked general who could command the army work with him, though he had no idea who the General Xin Yuzhongtong had arranged for him was. That's Zhao Wujiang, General Zhao. He's an old general of the Anan Protectorate Army. Back then, complying with the Sage Emperor's decree, our Anan Protectorate Army dispatched a few generals to teach the Mengshi Zhao Army the art of war. Zhao Wujiang was one of the participating generals. At the time, both Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuzong didn't have that high of a rank in the army, and both of them were very young. Back then, Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuzong were the best of friends. In truth, much of Duan Wuzong's knowledge of the art of war was taught by Zhao Wujiang. Zhao Wujiang passed down almost all his knowledge to him. From a certain perspective, the Whitestone Corps was trained up by Zhao Wujiang. Almost no one in the Anan Protectorate Army doesn't know of this. In the Battle of Arai, the Whitestone Corps was one of the reasons much of our heavy weaponry and ballistae weren't able to show their full might. As Chun Shu-sun looked down the mountain at that figure, he mentally sighed, his heart heavy. So it was him. A thought suddenly occurred to Wang Chong. The Anan Protectorate Army was the empire's chief garrison in the southwest and had many generals. Neither Mengshi Zhao nor Yusang could compare, as this was a question of military resources. Mengshi Zhao and Yusang were both lands barren of military learning, and so they were no match for the Great Tang in this aspect. This vast number of generals meant that it was impossible for Wang Chong to have an understanding of every one of them. But amongst all the generals, Zhao Wujiang was definitely one of the more influential ones, with an extremely high rank. Even in his last life, Wang Chong had heard of his name. This person wasn't involved in much, and his cultivation wasn't at Shenyu Zhongtong's level, and certainly not on Zhangqiu Jianxiong's level. But there was one thing that Wang Chong could be sure of. Zhao Wujiang was a fierce general not one bit inferior to Duan Wuzong. There are fathers and sons in the army, but no brothers on the battlefield. Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuzong might once have treated each other as brothers, but his actions were partially responsible for the current situation in the southwest. Now that Duan Wuzong is entering the fray, it's truly suitable for Zhao Wujiang to hold the line. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. The art of war was like the art of chess, soldier against soldier, general against general. Wang Chong didn't have a deep understanding of Zhao Wujiang's ability, nor had he ever experienced it before. But none of this was important because starting from this moment, the true director of the chessboard was not Zhao Wujiang, but himself. The matters of the world are like a chess game, as is the art of war. Whether soldier or general, all of them are pieces on the chessboard. Daluan Ruozhen, Zheluofeng. Come. Let me see your abilities. Wang Chong looked down the mountain and waved his hand. Buzz. The mountain quaked. This time, over 30,000 Tang soldiers advanced. More than a third of the army preparing to participate in this second round. Bang 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 bang. War halo after dazzling war halo began to expand, appearing from the sky like ripples spreading over the surface of a lake as they expanded to cover the surrounding army. The halo of charge, the halo of defense, the black iron halo, the halo of tenacity, the charging bull halo, the attack halo, the strength halo. Thousands of halos merged together, covering the slopes. BZZT. The entire mountain seemed to transform into a wall of steel, exuding a dreadful aura. Kill! 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 With their tall shields planted into the ground, the Anan Protectorate army roared with shouts that caused the mountain to quake. The first fight had just concluded and the second battle was already about to begin. It was much faster than many of these soldiers had imagined. Ni! With a chorus of fierce neighs, the Whitestone Corps clashed with the Anan Protectorate army like two tides colliding. Rumble! The moment the two armies collided, the earth began to quake. This did not seem like two armies fighting, but two behemoths from time immemorial crashing against each other. The battle had begun once more. On the fierce battlefield, an individual's martial strength had much less impact. More emphasis was placed on the strength and cooperation of the entire army. In this war, if the Anan Protectorate army were regarded as a sturdy dike, the Whitestone Corps would be the ferocious waves, endlessly beating against the walls. Although the Whitestone Corps outnumbered the Anan Protectorate army and had similar training, the individual quality of each soldier of the Anan Protectorate army, the overall strength of the army, and the cooperation between soldiers completely surpassed the Whitestone Corps, creating an absolute advantage. Along the slope, the tens of thousands of Tang soldiers were using the steel walls Wang Chong had set up and distributing their forces in such a way that they could display an unbelievable defensive power. On this battlefield, it often required 3 soldiers, sometimes even more, of the Whitestone Corps to put any significant pressure on a single Tang soldier. And to break through required even more manpower. Such a fighting style was simply unthinkable on the plains. The general has ordered that anyone who dares to retreat will be immediately executed. The general has ordered that each kill will be rewarded with 10 taels of gold. Those who kill 10 enemies will receive a title of nobility that can be passed on to your heirs. A Whitestone Corps commander with a scar on his face shouted himself hoarse. Seeing a soldier in the crowd who wanted to retreat, he lashed out with his whip, shattering that soldier's armor and sending his screaming body flying. Duba Luoqi was a rather famous battlefield supervisor of the Whitestone Corps. In a battle, whenever he saw someone retreating, he would act without mercy. This time, the commander-in-chief of the Whitestone Corps, Duan Wuzong, had personally stepped onto the battlefield, and all his officers had followed. Duba Luoqi was one of them. With the Tang army suddenly becoming like an impenetrable wall, everyone was under immense pressure. There were many generals like Duba Luoqi frenziedly overseeing the battlefield. Groups 1 and 2 go up together. Use shields to open the path, spearmen behind. The first to break the Tang defense will be richly rewarded. Groups 3 and 4, fill the ranks and don't retreat. His Majesty is observing the battle from the rear. Anyone who dares to retreat will have their family and relatives executed. The Tang soldiers are just sheep in wolves' clothing. They're simply no match for us. We know everything that they've been trained in. If we can defeat them once, we can defeat them twice, thrice. 100,000 soldiers, 100,000. Our Whitestone Corps has 100,000 soldiers, and the Tang army on that mountain can barely manage 100,000 at their most desperate. I don't believe that we can't break through their defenses with all the soldiers we have. Charge, charge. Steady, steady. All the officers of the Whitestone Corps were supervising the battle all along the front line, their halos of thorns shining in the air. Unlike in the first wave, the Whitestone Corps was putting all its strength into this assault. Compared to the frequent orders from the officers of the Whitestone Corps, the orders given by the officers of the Anan Protectorate Army were much simpler. Shield wall. Spearmen, get ready. Reserve forces. Prepare to head up at any moment. As the target of imitation for the Whitestone Corps, the Anan Protectorate Army presented a much less complicated picture. In battles of infantry, if the Great Tang claimed to be second, no one in the world would dare claim to be first. In this aspect, Wang Chong hadn't even needed to give any instructions as of yet. Not bad. On the summit, Wang Chong nodded at this sight. The Anan Protectorate Army had always been a well-trained army, and the Battle of Arai had eliminated the weaker ones, leaving behind only the elite of the elite. The greatest advantages of these elites were their individual strength, ample experience, and ability to cooperate with each other. Most importantly of all, they excelled in executing tactical maneuvers. Across the world, not a single general existed who didn't want to command such a well-trained army of elites. Wang Chong had always prioritized the quality of his soldiers. Only once he could ensure the quality would he seek out quantity. But if he could only choose one of the two, he would always pick a well-trained army without hesitation. The rest, whether it was logistics, fighting power, or the pressure from the empire, were of minimal importance in comparison. Across the entire empire, the Anxi Protectorate Army led by Gao Xianji and Feng Chongqing is probably the strongest. It only has around 300,000 soldiers, but with its ballistae and armaments, it's truly armed to the teeth. Moreover, all of the 300,000 soldiers can act as both infantry and cavalry, each of them traveling with a horse. Most importantly, they often work together with the cavalry of the various kingdoms of Anxi and are extremely experienced in dealing with nomads. If you add to that the fact that these are the most elite and courageous troops of the empire, the 200,000 reserve soldiers in Qixi, and the around 100,000 soldiers belonging to the small kingdoms of the western regions who obey the Great Tang, and this army is completely capable of intimidating the hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the enemy countries. There's no question that the Anxi Protectorate Army is the most powerful fighting force. But below the Anxi Protectorate Army, Geshu Han's Big Dipper Army in Longxi is probably only a little bit inferior, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Geshu Han's Big Dipper Army was also a most powerful one, having stopped the assaults from the Yusang Empire time after time. From the massive Yusang Empire's inability to get past Geshu Han, one could easily imagine the strength of the Big Dipper Army. Of the various protectorates of the Great Tang, the Anan Protectorate Army suffered from the smallest number of attacks, which resulted in the Anan Protectorate Army having the lowest level of strength. However, once the 180,000 elites had been filtered through the grinder that was the Battle of Arai, the 60,000 some left over were the elite of the elite. Their fighting power had not dropped, only risen. For one person to command 60,000 elites of the Anan Protectorate Army, its hundreds of commanders, and two fierce generals like Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, this was beyond Wang Chong's wildest dreams. For such a complete fighting force to have survived until now was something that Wang Chong had never even dared to imagine. Daluan Ruozhen, Huashu Huaizong, Zheluofeng, Duan Gechuan. As long as I'm here, none of you will ever be able to get past this mountain. much less wantonly run over the southwest like you did in my last life. Ambition has a price to pay, and a great ambition requires an equally great price. Now is the time for all of you to pay that price. Let me see just who will be the final victor of the southwest. His sleeves flapping in the wind, Wang Chong looked down the mountain, a harsh light in his eyes. Boom! With a heaven-shaking boom, a white figure and its dazzling halo cleaved like a massive sword into the defensive line of the Anan Protectorate army. This massive boom sent the massive metal shields, and the shield soldiers and spearmen behind them, flying like aimless kites. The great Tang defense line that had persisted for so long was broken in an instant. All troops charge. Duan Wuzong raised the sword in his right hand into the sky, his entire body exuding the aura of a mighty god, powerful ripples of energy rising from him. The first wave had failed, so Duan Wuzong, the commander-in-chief of the Whitestone Corps, had finally decided to personally take the field. And with Duan Wuzong's strike, this second wave pushed toward the Tang army. With Duan Wuzong personally leading the charge, the Whitestone Corps became a completely different army. The difference in their damaging capabilities and charging power was like that between night and day. I don't believe that the 100,000 soldiers of the Whitestone Corps can't break through these soldiers led by a defeated general. Everyone, follow me. Anyone who dares to retreat will be executed without question. With a wave of Duan Wuzong's sword, all his bodyguards formed into dense ranks and began to surge forward. His easy defeat at the hands of the Great Tang in front of Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaizong, as well as Zheluofeng's rebuke, had stirred feelings of pride and fury in Duan Wuzong's heart. Boom! His dantian vibrated as countless streams of stellar energy roiled out. As Duan Wuzong sat on his horse, his sword raised, an image began to appear behind him, that of a Buddha holding baskets of herbs in its hands. Bang, bang, bang. Space began to vibrate as spheres of light suddenly began to burst out around the Buddha. These spheres of light began to transform into various artifacts. A medicinal pestle, an herbal pot, a medicine stone, a medicine bottle, and a medicine jar. This was the legendary medicine king of Irai mythology. The beliefs of the six Zhao of Irai differed from those of the Central Plains. Their religion had been formed from local beliefs. The medicine king was both Irai's god of medicine and god of strength. It was no secret to the people of Mengshi Zhao that Duan Wuzong cultivated the medicine king technique. Rumble. As Duan Wuzong manifested the medicine king, a massive halo of thorns began to reverberate and revolve around him. In an instant, the earth began to quake and Duan Wuzong's clothes and black hair began to flutter. A storm of energy began to explode from his body. Boom! With a light jolt from the halo, all the Anan Protectorate army soldiers in a radius of around 10 zhang felt their bones shatter and muscles tear. All of them were sent flying into the air like ragdolls. All soldiers advance. The officers of the Whitestone Corps acted like a giant net, gathering up their soldiers around Duan Wuzong so that they could charge up the mountain. Rumble. Dust roiled and screams filled the air. Amongst the massive Anan Protectorate army, not a single person was capable of halting Duan Wuzong's advance. Kill! With Duan Wuzong opening the way, the Whitestone Corps rallied, beginning to yell out as they followed their general up the mountain. Although Wang Chong had shipped a large number of war armaments from the capital, even going so far as to set up a set of metal walls along the side of the mountain, these metal walls were targeted against cavalry. They weren't much used against infantry, at least not against the Whitestone Corps. Crash! Like a breaking dike, a hole was quickly opened up in the seemingly impenetrable Tang defense. Under Duan Wuzong's command, this gap further widened. Not bad. Uncle Duan is truly putting all his strength into this. As Fenjie watched the battle from the base of the mountain, a strange look flashed through his eyes. Behind him, Zheluofeng and Duan Gechuan also nodded their heads. Dispatching a general is not as effective as inciting a general, was one of the oldest maxims of military strategy. With Duan Wuzong personally leading the charge, the performance of the Whitestone Corps had instantly improved. The Whitestone Corps truly does have some power. Although it can't compare to the cavalry of Yusang, they could be commended as elites. On the other side, although Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaizong said nothing, they still mentally gave their acknowledgments. Neither Daluan Ruozan nor Huashu Huizong had personally witnessed the Battle of Arai, only seen the aftermath. In truth, when they heard that the 180,000 elites of the Anan Protectorate army had lost, the pair had been rather shocked. There was no doubt that Mengshi Zhao under the leadership of Zheluofeng was a completely new country. The strength they had shown was ample proof of this. Roar! Kill! Follow General! Slaughter the Tang! All the soldiers of the Whitestone Corps were suddenly energized, their bellows resounding through the air as they charged up the slope. The Great Tang's situation had instantly become extremely unfavorable. In the first wave, they had managed to persevere for a long time before retreating. This time, however, the defense line had almost instantly collapsed. Humph, leading the troops in a charge is a fine thing, but the heart is easy to break. For the Grand Commander of the army to charge into the enemy formation before the situation is clear, putting themselves at risk, is no sensible act. As the two sides battled, the only person on this mountain who managed to maintain their calm was Wang Chong. By leading the charge, Duan Wuzong had bolstered the morale of the Whitestone Corps. He seemed to be building an astonishing momentum, but it wasn't even worth a laugh in Wang Chong's eyes. He has the courage, but he doesn't have the wisdom or resolve. Duan Wuzong, I'm afraid you wouldn't even count as a third-rate general. Wang Chong thought. A general should only have to personally lead the charge if the situation required it, not merely because the sovereign had ordered it or because one wanted to open a gap in the enemy's front line. In Wang Chong's eyes, Duan Wuzong's attainments in the art of war weren't enough to make him an average general. If the commander of an army decided to lead the charge in every battle, what would differentiate him from the common soldiers? Boom! Duan Wuzong's large-scale advance wasn't able to last for long. Crash! Right when Duan Wuzong's momentum had reached its peak, there was a massive explosion that brought Duan Wuzong's seemingly unstoppable charge to an immediate halt. It was like a flood crashing against a dike, a windstorm encountering a cliff. In the middle of the army, between two of the large steel walls, a mighty figure descended like a pillar from heaven to stop Duan Wuzong's attacks and prevent the Whitestone Corps from leaving. One general and one black horse had been enough to stop Duan Wuzong's unstoppable momentum. Duan Wu Zong! A voice howled out, each word shouted out from clenched teeth. His red cape flapping in the wind, that dark-skinned general stood erect on his horse with his saber bared. His cold eyes fixed on the charging Duan Wuzong, desiring nothing more than to eat him alive. Zhao Wujiang. Upon seeing this general, Duan Wuzong appeared dazed for a moment, but he very quickly began to explode with a fiendish energy that soared to the heavens. When two armies clash, each person has their master. Don't blame me. Those who try to stop me will die. Rumble. Duan Wuzong's massive halo reverberated as his body began to explode with dazzling light. As he waved his long sword, the medicine king behind him seemed to focus its eyes. Countless medicine pots, pestles, jars, each one, as heavy as a mountain, flew toward Zhao Wujiang in a furious storm. Boom! As one of these medicine jars flew past a metal wall, it directly tore it out of the ground, even though each piece of that wall weighed several thousand jin. Buzz! There was a flash of light as all the attacking medicine stones, jars, and pots seemed to strike an invisible wall. 3 or 4 zhang out from Zhao Wujiang, they stopped in the air. These objects formed from destructive stellar energy were completely incapable of getting any closer to Zhao Wujiang. Treacherous cur. If I knew that you would have betrayed me, I would have executed you back then. Zhao Wujiang's eyes were bloodshot, spitting with flames of rage. Fwum! A bloody fire flashed, incinerating those medicine stones, jars, and pestles. The counterattack of these bloody flames crashed against the stellar energy emanating from Duan Wuzong's body. Crash! A searing and refined energy soared into the sky. Meanwhile, the clanging and clattering of steel filled the air as Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuzong smashed their stellar energies against each other. In a flash, in the moment their stellar energies met, the two jumped forward. Clang! Saber met sword, and the collision of blazing stellar energy and halos of thorns instantly triggered a fierce explosion. Around this pair, both Great Tang Soldier and Whitestone Core Soldier had no time to dodge, even react. Screaming, they were flung away. Kill! Behind Zhao Wujiang, the officers of the Anan Protectorate Army unsheathed their swords and bellowed, taking this opportunity to lead the Anan Protectorate Army charging down the mountain. At the same time, the officers of the Whitestone Corps also led their troops up. These two armies, who were most similar in style in all of the southwest, fell into a fierce melee. It's enough! On the summit, Wang Chong slowly drew his gaze back and began to look in another direction. The course of this battle would not be decided by the fight between these two generals. The moment Zhao Wujiang appeared and intercepted Duan Wuzong, the battle had moved on to its next phase. It's my turn now. Zheluofeng, Duan Gachuan, this time, your Whitestone Corps won't just be losing 8,000 soldiers. A chilling smile emerged on Wang Chong's lips as he stared at those two figures in the sea of soldiers. Courtesy would never be enough to teach a lesson to one's opponent. Only through battle could one leave an indelible mark. The Empire's southwest had already paid too great a price. Now, it was finally time for his enemies to pay for their actions. Although he was currently an insignificant player in the field of martial arts, the art of war had always been a contest of intelligence. Zheluofeng, Duan Gachuan, Fenjie, and even Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaitsong, no matter what sort of dazzling pasts these foreign powerhouses had, no matter what sort of desires and ambitions they had against the Great Tang, Wang Chong would let them properly understand what the might of the war saint was. Only a most painful lesson would teach these foreign dignitaries to respect the Great Tang. Pass on my order. Begin the operation. With a wave of his right hand, Wang Chong swung down the signal flag. Zhao Wujiang was only bait. He had never been the commander of this battle. From the moment Duan Wuzong had decided to commit the entirety of his 100,000 troops, he had already fallen into Wang Chong's net. Boom! The bloody flag on the summit fluttered for a few moments in the wind before suddenly swinging down. In the next moment, the Anan Protectorate Army soldiers who had been putting their lives on the line to defend suddenly loosened up. It was like a bowstring that had been pulled to the breaking point and then suddenly released. In an instant, other than the area where Duan Wuzong was fighting, the Whitestone Corps across the front lines subconsciously began to pursue. Not good. Duan Wuzong was hypersensitive to his surroundings, and his eyes widened as he noticed this out of the corner of his vision. At any other moment, he would have had ample time to put a stop to this. But now, just when Duan Wuzong was opening his mouth to shout out an order, a bloody light suddenly assailed him. A massive saber cleaved down from the skies, imbued with a destructive energy. Boom! Stellar energy reverberated as two tyrannical energies clashed, their collision transforming into a pillar of light several zhang thick. The order that Duan Wuzong had been preparing to shout out was instantly pushed back into his mouth by Zhao Wujiang's saber. Quickly retreat. Don't chase them. At the base of the mountain, Crown Prince Fenjie trembled at this sight, his heart seized by anxiety. He had subconsciously taken a few steps forward, but only when a cold gust blew past did he realize that the sounds of fighting on the mountain were too loud for his voice to be heard. Disaster! The past is repeating. It's this move again. At the base of the mountain, Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaitsong also paled. They recalled that the Anan Protectorate Army had used exactly this move not too long ago to inflict a defeat on the Whitestone Corps. Kill! Kill! With General here, the Anan Protectorate Army can no longer hold on. The Whitestone Corps soldiers in the rear didn't understand what was going on up ahead. They only sensed that the front had loosened and immediately rushed up to fill the ranks. The wisdom in Wang Chong's decision to choose this mountain as the place to start the battle was once more showing itself. The incline of the slope and the metal walls looming from its surface greatly limited the vision of the soldiers in the rear. It was simply impossible for them to promptly learn what was happening on the front lines, and certainly not something as subtle as Wang Chong's shift in tactics. Boom! As a crowd of soldiers surged forward, their orderly formations once more fell into chaos. The effects from Duan Wuzong's joining the front lines were instantly nullified. Kill! On the mountain, The dense ranks of spearmen and axemen of the Anan Protectorate army formed a mighty wall and swiftly fell upon the disorderly Whitestone Corps line. Clang, clang, clang. The clanging of metal and a chorus of screams filled the heavens. An army without organization or formation, in which each soldier was fighting on its own, was nothing more than a scattered mob. Against a regular and organized army, it couldn't even take a single blow. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Cold pikes plunged in through the chest and out through the back, snuffing out the lives of Whitestone Corps soldiers in mere seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 100, 1,000. In the blink of an eye, thousands of Whitestone Corps soldiers had fallen. The disorderly Whitestone Corps was simply no match for the unstoppable Anan Protectorate army. Rumble. Duan Wuzong suddenly pushed back Zhao Wujiang with a slash of his sword and quickly turned around to make some distance, his complexion ashen. All rear troops forward. Soldiers in the front, hold the line. Pursuit is forbidden without an order. Before the battle started, he had already thought about how to defend against this Tang tactic. Even though he had been prepared, he had still unexpectedly fallen for the trap. Boom! Bloody light flashed as Zhao Wujiang pursued with his saber. Duan Wuzong had only bought enough time to give this single order before he was once more caught up in battle. Duan Wuzong, you still have time to give orders? You should first worry about yourself. Take my sword. Damn it, Zhao Wujiang. You think that you can hold me down like this? Die for me. Duan Wuzong's furious roars echoed through the heavens. Alas, no matter how furious he was, when Wang Chong dispatched Zhao Wujiang, his advantages had been completely nullified. However, despite all this, Duan Wuzong's order had still been useful. The Whitestone Corps had learned from the Great Tang, learned from the Anan Protectorate army. Purely in terms of ability to execute orders, it was only a little lacking compared to the Great Tang. Rear troops forward. Fill the ranks. Forward troops pull back. Hold the line. Anyone who dares to charge out of the line will immediately be executed. Quickly. Anyone who dares to act slowly will be handled according to military law. Acting on Duan Wuzong's orders, the hundreds of officers of the Whitestone Corps began to adjust, issuing their own orders. Through the officer corps of the Whitestone Corps, Duan Wuzong's orders were swiftly carried out. In a very short time, the Whitestone Corps quickly cut off its crumbling front line. The disorganized soldiers at the front were abandoned while the Whitestone Corps formed a new front line behind them. Further back, the dense ranks of the Whitestone Corps were coming up to reinforce. The previous collapse seemed to be completely ineffective against the rest of the 100,000 soldiers of the Whitestone Corps. Duan Wuzong had already grasped the essence of utilizing his troops. This is no longer something as simple as imitation. He's already managed to truly grasp the idea of changing formations and developed his own style. It looks like Zheluofeng, in his many years reigning over the Sixth Zhao, has engaged in some bold and decisive reforms. At the very least, Meng Shizhao truly does have the strength to challenge the Anan Protectorate army. As Wang Chong stood on the summit and watched the Whitestone Corps cut off the front from their rear and swiftly reform their lines, he couldn't help but give a nod of approval. Even as an enemy, Wang Chong had to admit that Zheluofeng hadn't managed to conquer the Sixth Zhao and bring Meng Shizhao to its current state purely through luck. It had been no coincidence that the Whitestone Corps led by Duan Wuzong had dealt a heavy blow to Shenyu Zhongtong's Anan Protectorate army. The current Meng Shizhao truly did have the military resources to expand outward. At the very least, the Whitestone Corps had immediately decided to give up on some of its soldiers and reform its lines, rendering the tactics of the Anan Protectorate army ineffective, which was not something any ordinary army could do. Unfortunately for you, it's still useless. Wang Chong coldly chuckled and made a hand signal, once more giving an order. The blood-red signal flag once more began to wave. Bang, bang, bang. All the disorderly Whitestone Corps soldiers who had been abandoned were quickly cut down. Roar. Bellowing, the sabermen, spearmen, and axemen retreated while the shieldmen charged forward. From the middle of the mountain to the base, the thousands of Anan Protectorate army soldiers once more contended with the soldiers of the Whitestone Corps. Meanwhile, the rest of the army continued to do nothing. Shenyu Zhongtong, Wang Yan, Chen Shusun, and the other high-ranking generals of the Anan Protectorate army, excluding Zhao Wujiang, remained in their positions. None of them moved, as if the battle below had nothing to do with them. Kill! Countless Tang soldiers surged out like water gushing out of a floodgate, once more charging toward the formations of the Whitestone Corps. It was a squeeze, a constant squeeze. A similar scene took place once more, as the thousands of soldiers of the Whitestone Corps also charged. But without Duan Wuzong, the Whitestone Corps no longer presented a lethal danger to the Anan Protectorate Army. Boom! When the two armies clashed and the two fell into a fierce melee, something surprising occurred. Retreat! Quickly withdraw! While the Whitestone Corps was completely unprepared, the Tang soldiers at the very front of the lines suddenly retreated. And then something very strange took place. As if being punched by countless invisible fists, thousands of Whitestone Corps soldiers were carried along by their inertia in pursuit. The formation that had been so tidy and disciplined a few seconds ago once more fell into the exact same chaos. Under the eyes of Daluan Ruozhen, Huashu Huaitsong, Zheluofeng, Duangechuan, and Fenjie, these powerhouses of the southwest, the Whitestone Corps once more seemed to fall under Wang Chong's spell, once more fell into the exact same predicament. At this moment, let alone foreign powerhouses like Zheluofeng and Huashu Huaitsong, even Shenyu Zhongtong and Wang Yan on the summit gasped. Duan Wuzong was already doing his utmost to get out of the predicament that Wang Chong had trapped him in, and all the officers of the Whitestone Corps were doing all they could to maintain order in their lines. But in the blink of an eye, all their efforts were rendered for naught. The entire Whitestone Corps once more became a plaything in Wang Chong's palm. Hiss, this boy! Duan Wuzong is simply no match for him. He's just being played around with. At the base of the mountain, Daluan Ruozhen had at some point stopped waving his fan. That leisurely smile on his lips had gradually tightened as he focused. I'm afraid that I've underestimated this boy. This was the only thought in Daluan Ruozhen's mind. All of Wang Chong's previous battle were completely meaningless to Daluan Ruozhen, as he had not witnessed them. The only ones he had truly seen were Wang Chong's 3 clashes with the Whitestone Corps. The first 2 times had not left a very deep impression on him. At the most, he had realized that Wang Chong was quite the talented individual. But with this third time, with this battle taking place before him, his impressions instantly changed. Whether Duan Wuzong was willing or not, no matter how hard the officers of the Whitestone Corps worked, no matter how well their soldiers worked together, no matter how much training they had gone through, none of it mattered before this youth called Wang Chong. With a simple and casual order, Wang Chong had made the efforts of Duan Wuzong and the officers of the Whitestone Corps completely meaningless. No matter how mentally prepared those soldiers had been, they had still fallen for the trap without the slightest resistance. What a frightening level of military arts. This youth called Wang Chong is going to be far more troublesome than we thought. He's probably going to be the greatest impediment for our Yusang Empire in the southwest. Daluan Ruozhen's brow furrowed as this thought flashed through his mind. He was never one to lightly furrow his brow, but everything was different now. The Anan Protectorate Army was still the same Anan Protectorate Army, but the person commanding it was completely different. It was someone incredible, sharp and vicious, someone whose thoughts were nigh unfathomable. Bang, bang, bang. The situation on the battlefield was constantly fluctuating. While Daluan Ruozhen, Huashu Huaitsong, and the others were dazed by the tactics being displayed by the Tang army, Wang Chong's tactics were already beginning to show their effects. As the orderly yet dense ranks of the Tang army charged down the mountain, a harvest of slaughter took place once more. One soldier of the Whitestone Corps after another screamed as they were felled by the spears and axes of the Anan Protectorate Army. Kill! Don't be afraid of them. A few of the braver Whitestone Corps soldiers grew furious and roared, attempting to charge forward and take down a few Tang soldiers with them. But with flashes of light, squelch, 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 sabers and swords stabbed in, running them through. It took mere moments for these fearless soldiers of the Whitestone Corps to fall backward, their eyes wide open. That shouldn't be. As these Whitestone Corps soldiers fell, their hearts were filled with reluctance. By the shore of the Arai, they had killed their fair share of great Tang elites. And through the deaths of these elites of the Anan Protectorate Army, they had built up a formidable self-confidence. The Whitestone Corps was not one bit lacking compared to the Anan Protectorate Army. No, far surpassed it. But none of them understood how things could have changed so quickly. This battle had been fought in a complete fog. Although they had been able to see everything clearly, they were clueless as to what had happened in their defeat. We clearly had the advantage, so why did it turn out like this? With these final thoughts, the minds of these Whitestone Corps soldiers went dark. Thud, thud, thud. Countless corpses covered the mountainside. This time, the casualties the Whitestone Corps had suffered far surpassed the first time, and the deaths had happened over a much shorter period of time. When more than 10,000 people were taking part in a battle, the number of deaths could climb to a massive sum far faster than people could imagine. Warning: the number of deaths in the Anan Protectorate Army has reached 1021. User is one step closer to obliteration. Congratulations to User for killing 20,000 Mengshi Zhao soldiers. The limit has been increased by 1,000. The condition for User's obliteration has been updated. When the remaining soldiers of the Anan Protectorate Army drop below 39,000, User will be obliterated. A familiar voice unleashed a waterfall of messages in Wang Chong's mind. As he stood on the summit, his hair flying in the wind, a smile crept onto his face. The Whitestone Corps only has 80,000 soldiers left. Mengshi Zhao organized its army in a similar fashion to the Great Tangs. It mostly consisted of infantry, and amongst all the corps, the Whitestone Corps, whose soldiers wielded protective shields, was always the corps at the very front. Without the protection of the Whitestone Corps, the Mengshi Zhao would present much less of a threat to the Great Tang. The quality of the Great Tang's equipment was known throughout the world. All of its soldiers were armed to the teeth. If the Whitestone Corps didn't exist, the Great Tang would be able to quickly exploit their advantage in equipment. With 1021 deaths, this is almost a 20-to-1 ratio in casualties. Not bad. If I can keep this ratio, the 100,000 Great Tang soldiers can grind away all 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army. Wang Chong inwardly sneered. With regards to these people with wild ambitions who coveted the Central Plains and the Great Tang, only a harsh lesson would let them understand down to their very bones that there were some things and some people that could not be offended, that could not be coveted. Pull back. 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 On the mountain, all the soldiers were panicking. The initial 8,000 some casualties hadn't caused much of a stir. But now that this number had reached 20,000 and was still increasing, everything had changed. 20,000 deaths in an army of 100,000 was one death in every 5 soldiers. The corpses scattered over the mountain were not something that anyone could disregard. Retreat! Damn it! What did these scoundrels do? In 3 consecutive waves, the Tang army had used exactly the same method to defeat the Whitestone Corps, leaving all the officers of the Whitestone Corps terrified. They had completely understood the plan and intention, yet they still could not prevent their enemies from using this simple plan to defeat them. Bastard! Duan Wuzong was both shocked and infuriated. The Medicine King behind him and the massive halo of thorns under him were both being pushed to their maximum level. Boom, boom, boom. One wave of stellar energy after another crashed against Zhao Wujiang. Duan Wuzong was also putting his sharp sword to good use, unleashing a storm of blows on Zhao Wujiang. It's useless, Zhao Wujiang declared in a bone-chilling voice, his eyes giving Duan Wuzong a profound stare. He had long ago sensed and understood Duan Wuzong's intentions. To want to break free of me now? Isn't that a little too late? Bang! His right foot pressing against the hardy ground, Zhao Wujiang charged forward like a war god, his long saber slicing through the air with a momentum that could cleave open the heavens. As he slashed down at Duan Wuzong, the pair once more engaged in a fierce battle. Even though Duan Wuzong already wanted to retreat, no matter how much effort he put in attempting to break free from Zhao Wujiang, his attempts had all failed. Bastard, you madman! Duan Wuzong's heart was seething with rage. The losses inflicted on the Whitestone Corps made him want to cry tears of blood. These were the soldiers that he had personally trained. The Whitestone Corps was a project that he had poured much of his life into. Even though the Whitestone Corps had possessed the numerical advantage, it was like a plaything in the hands of the Great Tang. Before the waves of soldiers could show their power, they had become corpses on the mountain. Although the officers in the army had done their utmost to restrain the army and maintain the formations, Their efforts had been fruitless before the tactics of the Great Tang. Ha ha ha, Duan Wuzong. I know that you've been imitating the Great Tang all this time, and I also know that you've always wanted to surpass the Great Tang, surpass me. For Mengshi Zhao to hold such ambitions, to want to take from the Great Tang despite all it has done to help Mengshi Zhao, from military to agriculture, from Confucian teachings to silk production, is absolutely despicable. But, Duan Wuzong, Mengshi Zhao will never succeed, and you will never succeed. Do you know why? Do you know where you are lacking? Seeing the impatient Duan Wuzong do all he could to try and escape, but fail time and time again, filled Zhao Wujiang's heart with indescribable pleasure. The loss of so many comrades on the shore of the Arai had stricken Zhao Wujiang's heart with a terrible pain, and he had believed himself to hold some of the responsibility. For this reason, he had deeply criticized himself. Now, however, the sight of these Mengshi Zhao soldiers who had killed his brothers falling one after another, the sight of Duan Wuzong's face twisted in rage, left Zhao Wujiang feeling most refreshed. Zhao Wujiang, shut your mouth! Duan Wuzong roared in anger, his eyes bloodshot. Ha ha ha! Duan Wuzong, you don't want to listen, but you must. Do you know why your Mengshi Zhao and Zheluofeng will never be able to succeed? Why you and your Whitestone Corps will never be able to compare to the Annan Protectorate Army? Because the Great Tang will always have more talented people than you. Talented generals, talented ministers, talented officials. These people might not appear in any particular place, such that you would never know that they existed. But when the empire is facing difficulties, when the empire requires them, they will descend from the heavens, one after the other, forming an unending stream to oppose you. Did you think that surpassing me was enough? Ha ha ha. Duan Wuzong, you're too naive. Although I'm a high-ranking general of the Annan Protectorate Army, I'm nothing in the Great Tang. There are hundreds or thousands of people who surpass Zhao Wujiang in either cultivation or understanding of the art of war. At the heart of the matter, I, Zhao Wujiang, am only a nameless soldier. Do you know who the true commander of this battle was? The one that defeated you? A 17-year-old boy, 17 years old. Duan Wuzong, can you imagine that? An ordinary 17-year-old boy can batter your army into utter defeat, can treat your combined Mengshi, Yusang army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers like a plaything. Bullshit. Duan Wuzong finally couldn't help but curse. Although he knew that Zhao Wujiang was intentionally provoking him, he still couldn't hold back his rage. Defeating the Great Tang, revitalizing the 6th Zhao of Arai, spreading the name of the Mengshi Zhao Empire across the continent, and raising the banner of Arai across the 9 provinces was not Zheluofeng's dream alone. It was the dream of all the people of Mengshi Zhao and all of its generals. Great General Duan Gechuan, Crown Prince Fenjie, Duan Wuzong, the Whitestone Corps, the Arai Corps, and the commanders of all the other corps. Every general of Mengshi Zhao held this intense desire deep within their hearts. Thus, Zheluofeng was not the only person to have dreamt of this war, to have wanted to incite it. This was the collective wish of the entirety of Mengshi Zhao. As long as the Great Tang remained along the shores of the Arai, as long as Mengshi Zhao remained a vassal of the Great Tang, as long as Mengshi Zhao did not surpass the Great Tang, generals like him would continue to appear. Duan Wuzong could allow Zhao Wujiang to humiliate him, but he could not permit Zhao Wujiang to destroy his dreams. Squelch! Right when Duan Wuzong was most furious and agitated, a long sword spitting flames pierced through Duan Wuzong's stellar energy and stabbed deep into his shoulder blade. The scarlet tip emerged from Duan Wuzong's back. Aya! As Duan Wuzong screamed, Zhao Wujiang's tyrannical and destructive energy passed through the shoulder blade and thundered through the rest of Duan Wuzong, traveling through all his meridians. The fires of rage were instantly extinguished. Zhao Wujiang stepped forward and slapped Duan Wuzong's chest with his palm. Boom! Under the eyes of thousands of soldiers, Duan Wuzong's body crumpled into a ball and began to spin through the air like a ragdoll. General! All the soldiers felt their hearts chill. And at the base of the mountain, Zheluofeng and Fenjie's minds were completely blank.